I'm like, okay, cool. Like, we're back on track. I got it. I just got to do this. Then you might go take your first swing in the cage and you're like, oh shit, maybe not. But
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here on You Think, presented by Audiorama and Body Armor. Lot going on. We make our tackle football debut this weekend. We are getting ready for our jamboree, so it'll be the first time the kids are out there playing, tackle against somebody else. We've been practicing now for, what seems like 6 years. Football is a grind. I'll tell you what, getting 10 and 11-year-old kids to learn the plays, where to line up, how to tackle, how to hit, how to be tackled, how to block. Oh my gosh. I don't remember it being this difficult when I was a kid, but it's been a lot of fun. So we have our jamboree. I will have an update for you guys next week once it's done. But so we're looking forward to that. First time seeing the kids go against another live opponent. So that should, as always, that's pretty interesting. That's where we find out who can really do it and unfortunately who can't. So we're in the full grind of that. One other thing I want to touch on, because we talk a lot here about sports specialization and, kids playing sports year round. This fall, so my daughter's going to play soccer. So that's pretty standard. She's been doing that for a while. That's a pretty reasonable, practice or two a week and then a game on Saturday. Fine. My son's going to play fall baseball. My younger son, TJ, is going to play fall baseball. It's a lighter load. We don't play nearly as many games. It's a little more developmental. So that's pretty much straightforward. But since my oldest son's going to play tackle football, he's going to also continue to play with his fall travel baseball team coming out of the summer, which again is a highly competitive team. So there's an element of keeping those guys going through the fall. And I'll tell you, it is exhausting working with the other families who also play football and baseball and trying to get the kids to both sports, but not have something to do every single night. And we're trying to stack some of the practices. Fortunately, the baseball coach is great. And we can kind of coordinate the schedules. But I'll tell you what, for anybody who's playing more than one sport in a season, it is a grind. I don't know how I feel about it. I will keep everyone up to speed as the fall kind of goes forward. But so far, it's been a little overwhelming. I have to be honest. So hopefully we find our groove here when school starts and get into a little bit of a rhythm. So I will keep you posted on all of that from the Olsen Sports crazy world in this youth sports world. But I am super excited for today's episode. So as you guys know, there's a lot of baseball going on in the summer. We got the Little League World Series right now, which kind of captures the attention of the country this time of year, which is always fun to watch. See a bunch of 12-year-olds, playing ball, representing their towns. That's a cool deal. Obviously the Major League Baseball, it's post All-Star break now. We just saw the Field of Dreams game a couple weeks ago. Everyone's now jockeying for playoff spots and MLB kind of pictures, getting a little clearer of who are the contenders and who aren't. So I think our next guest is coming on at the perfect time. Today we are just thrilled to have the 2018 National League MVP, the left fielder of the Milwaukee Brewers, Christian Yelich. And what I found so interesting with talking to Christian is just his journey. We had Perfect Game. We had Tony from Perfect Game on a couple weeks ago. And Christian goes, listen, I was never the guy in the showcases. In high school, I was never the guy who made the All-American games. He goes, but then lo and behold, I was a first-round draft pick out of high school and went straight to the major leagues and obviously went on to be the MVP. And, the rest is history. So I think it was a really cool perspective to get from a current MLB professional all-star MVP caliber player and have him just, be able to reflect just, not that long ago to coming up through these showcase ranks, coming up through the youth circuit and what that looked like for him. And it looked a little different. He brought up Bryce Harper and some of these other more established guys in his class. And he goes, I wasn't as famous as Bryce Harper, but he goes, I was a first-round draft pick and my career, so it's just interesting to hear people's stories and different journeys. So it was a blast. I hope you guys enjoy this conversation with Christian. Thank you, as always, to our sponsor, Body Armor. Body Armor continues to not only fuel this show, but it also fuels the madness of my youth sports family and our youth sports team. So thank you so much to Body Armor for being along the ride of helping us kind of tell this story and navigate the world of competitive youth sports and everything in between. There's a lot of choices for sideline sports drinks, but in our family, my kids, myself, my wife, all of our teams, our kids gravitate towards Body Armor. There's just something about it. They love the flavors. They love the different tastes. They love it. There's just something about it that they all, pulls them in, and they get it. Body Armor is made with coconut water, B vitamins, no artificial sweeteners. You guys can go to drinkbodyarmor.com for more information. So thank you again so much to Body Armor for being a part of the You Think journey. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this interview with Christian Yelich. Christian, thank you so much for joining us today on You Think.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So as our listeners know, and you got a chance to say hi to one of my two boys before the show started, they were fired up to meet you. They've watched you, and they knew more about you. I'll be honest, they knew more about you than I think I did, because it's amazing. They pick it all up in like MLB The Show, and they play all these, so they know everything about all these kids. So they were fired up. We do a lot of baseball in our house, but I am not going to lie, I am not a baseball background guy, but I've come to just learn it and love it through watching my kids play it, and just watching them grow up and coach their teams and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So you're our first baseball guest. So for that, we're pretty fired up. So just tell us a little bit about, your backstory here at You Think. Like we're very interested in hearing how guys like yourself, where did they start, right? We all know you're an all-star, Gold Glover, but we want to know, where did it start? Your roots from California, growing up playing the game. Just give us your first baseball memory as a young kid.
Yeah, well, it was actually pretty similar to what you were describing, actually. I was like the first one in our family to play baseball. Everybody came from like a football or basketball background. And I did both of those growing up along with baseball. I just played everything with my friends. Made a lot of good friends through sports that way. And I'm actually still friends with like a lot of those guys today. And then I was just always probably best at baseball. And then so once I got to high school, I just chose baseball and stuck with that and was like, hey, if I'm going to do anything in sports like I want to do, it's probably going to be in baseball. So I put all my time and energy in that. But growing up, I played everything, played with my friends, did pretty much every sport you could probably do, I think. And then found one that I liked the best and was probably the best at, and then just kind of stayed with that. But nobody pushed me to do baseball, or we never really had a baseball background. So everyone was just like figuring it out. I learned the game through playing it, not really through going to private instructors or groomed to be a baseball player, I guess how it is a lot of ways. Growing up now, like kids are so specialized and they're either all baseball, all football, all basketball from a really young age. And I was never really like that.
Yeah, so dive into a little bit more of that. We cover, the specialization aspect, but we also cover, and you touched on it a couple of weeks ago. We had on Tony Harper from Perfect Game. I don't know if did you play any Perfect Game? Yeah. I'm sure you did a lot of those showcases and stuff. Yeah. So we had him on. My kids play Perfect Game events, and we fly around. It's just, again, it's 10U baseball, and we're flying across the country. It's a lot. But so tell us a little bit about, what you mean by that, right? So you weren't going to private batting lessons. Were you playing travel ball? Were you playing summer ball? Were you playing rec? Like what level of play were you growing up till you got to high school?
Yeah, I did all that, but it was all fairly new when I was still a kid. Like travel ball was a thing, but it's not nearly what it is today. Like it's so big today. And like I said, it's like 10U has travel ball and probably even younger. And I think
it goes to 9U.
Yeah, right. So
I can tell you from firsthand experience, it goes to 9U baseball. So
which is crazy. And I think I started playing travel ball when I was probably 12-ish, somewhere around there. But it was real local. I think like we weren't really like flying anywhere. It was travel ball, but it was a lot of kids from like the town that I grew up in. Like we were all together. We'd all play in the same little league or pony league, and then summer or whatever, we'd all be on the same travel team and then kind of go our own way. And I didn't do Perfect Game till high school, which was still kind of starting out. Like Perfect Game wasn't what Perfect Game is now. And I think my first Perfect Game, I was probably a sophomore in high school, maybe a junior in high school, and then did a few of them. I never made the All-American game. I got cut from Team USA. So I was one of those kids that I was a terrible showcase player, but when the game started, I could always play, which ended up working out for me in the long run. But if you just look at like each skill individually, like nothing probably stood out to you at the time. And So I don't know if I don't know what my best perfect game score ever was, but
We can
that
find
wasn't,
it out.
yeah.
Your profile, I promise you, is somewhere up there, along with
Oh yeah.
3,000 9-year-olds.
Right. So I was obviously never good enough to make their All-American game or whatever it was, but I
Well, you were
enjoyed it.
good. I think you were plenty good. I mean, you were good enough to obviously be drafted in the first round out of high school. So I think you did something right. The Miami Marlins. Before we touch on that, though, correct me if I'm wrong. You were committed to go to go to
Yeah.
University of Miami.
I
So
was.
tell me a little bit about that. Obviously, I'm an alum of
Yeah.
and went down there. The baseball program when I was in school. Ryan Braun, who was a teammate of yours,
Yeah.
he was in school with me. So I mean, they got a great program down there. So just talk a little bit about was that a hard decision, like to pass up going to Miami and then get
Yeah.
drafted by the Marlins?
Yeah. It took me. So back then, so I got drafted in June, and the signing deadline wasn't until like the end of August back then. And it's more July now, I think. So I took the whole summer basically to make a decision, but it was kind of made for me in a sense, being like a first round pick. Like you're going to get, if you really want to play in the major leagues, like being a first round pick, it's going to give you the best opportunity. You're going to get the longest leash. You're going to get every opportunity to succeed. And I was like, at the end of the day, I was like, what I really want to do is play Major League Baseball. And so this is the best opportunity. So that's kind of how I made my decision. But at the time when I committed to I actually thought I was going to college. Like I didn't become like a high round draft guy until really late. Like there's guys that are going to be first round picks when they're underclassmen or juniors or going into senior year. Like this guy's going to be, a first round pick for sure. Like my draft class was Harper, Manny Machado, like a lot of really, really good
Jesus.
players.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I knew these, like you play with them, you're like, oh yeah, these guys are first round picks. I saw Bryce when he was 15. We're at the same showcase. Like, this is the best player I've ever seen in my life. Me and him, we're not the same right now. He was 15, I think, and I was like 16 or 17, and he was unbelievable. But at the time when I made my decision to go to I honestly thought I was going to school, and I was originally committed to UCLA, which is like 20 minutes from where I grew up. And I changed my mind. I was like, if I'm going to go to school, like I want to go to school. I'm going to do this thing. So ended up kind of going back out and seeing what was out there. Cause I committed so early, which I think it was after my freshman year, maybe sophomore year, like verbal committed to UCLA. And looking back on it, it probably wasn't the best decision, and nothing against that program or those guys. Cause they're great. They actually won the College World Series, a few years after that. But I think kids commit so early now, and like you don't see your options. Like it's not, if you're good enough to play D1 baseball or go play pro baseball, like your options are going to be there. So take your visits, make like a really good decision. Don't be in a rush to be like, oh, I'm committed here because you see your friends doing that. It's still going to be there. Like they're not going to take it away. And if they do take it away, it's probably not a place you want to go anyway. So if I could do it over again, I'd probably do that. But did the whole visit thing and went to and just really liked it there. Jim Morris was the head coach at the time, who's now retired, but he was there, and just going to the football games, being on the campus, I just really liked it. I liked the guys on the team. When you do your official visit, just hanging out with them, and I was like, hey, this is a cool fit. I could see myself coming here. Ended up getting drafted by the Marlins. I spent a lot of time in Miami anyway, but just a different kind, and they're great people over there. And part of me always kind of wonders what it would have been like if I enrolled there and got to spend a few years there. I'm sure it would have been a pretty good time. But
I think you would have had a good time. I can promise you that from firsthand experience. I think you would have had a blast. From now on, I'm just going to consider you a Miami guy. I'm just going to lump you into that group. In my mind, you went to Miami. I want to go back to something you just said earlier that I think is super relevant to our conversation. You said, so you're at this showcase, you're 16 or whatever, and you're playing against guys like Bryce Harper and whatnot. So often at this young age, everybody wants to compare kids at 10, at 12, at 14, at 16. And as we all know, right, from going through it, certain kids grow and mature at different levels. Certain kids are late bloomers, early bloomers. The kid who dominates 12U ball sometimes doesn't make the varsity team, right? So how did you, as you started navigating and started entering these showcase type, you were obviously good enough to be in these showcases at 14, 15, 16 through high school. How did you handle looking around at your peers and, Yeah, that was your baseline and you were trying to keep up with guys, but also not letting that overwhelm you. And if you weren't the best kid at 14, that didn't mean that you couldn't still be a first round draft pick a few rounds later. Like, did you understand that in the time, or do you look back on it with a little different perspective now?
Um, I understood it a little bit, but I have a whole new perspective on it now. I guess you could say, like, back then it kind of showed you like, all right, like you need to, if you really want to do this, there's a lot of work. You got to work hard. There's a lot of room to go here if you want to be on these same levels. But like you said, when you're 12 years old, you have nothing to compare it to, or 13 or 14 years old. So when you see these kids who are so much bigger, stronger, faster, just more mature than you are, you think like, oh, this guy's really, really good. And then you kind of catch up and the gap closes, or maybe that guy goes a different route and never really, really makes it, or you stick with it and make improvements, and you kind of bloom and become what you become. But I remember me and my friends were all kind of the same skill level growing up. Like we were all pretty good. I had a few friends that ended up playing D1 baseball, so I never really knew any better. Like we were all pretty good, so it's kind of just being like one of the boys. It never really stood out like, oh, you're so much better than your friends or your peers. Like we were all just like, yeah, we played baseball, went to high school
we got
together, same pony
yeah.
ball. Like we're a good team. Like we're good. And then I didn't really feel like I was getting better than them, or like making big improvements till probably like sophomore year of high school, when I was like, okay, like I'm pretty good at this. And I might have I feel like I might be able to go to college doing this for sure. And then maybe get drafted, and then just kept getting better, just sticking with it, kept working, started to mature a little bit more. And then you start catching up and you start closing the gap, or lengthening the gap between like you and your peers. And you just never know when it's going to come. Like you just got to stick with it, I feel like. And if I could tell kids that, say, don't worry about what's going on around you or your peers. Kind of just worry about yourself as getting better, learning the game, making improvements, just trying to better yourself as a person and an athlete. And you never know what can happen. Just give yourself every opportunity to succeed. If you don't succeed, don't let it be because you didn't work hard or you didn't want it bad enough. And then if it works out, that's great. If it doesn't, that's great too. And you learned a lot of great lessons along the way that you can kind of apply later in life. And, for us, we're fortunate enough to where we kind of made it a career and we're able to do it, but it doesn't always go that way for everybody, but you can learn a lot of things along the way.
Yeah, so when you started getting serious, is there one moment that you can put your finger on? Mine was, I went down to the University of Miami. I was a rising 10th grader. Back then, they used to hold like week-long camps. You'd go down to campus, we'd sleep in the dorms, eat in the cafeteria. There was hundreds of kids from over the, high school kids from all over the country, 9th through 12th grade. And leaving that camp as a rising 10th grader, the coaches called me and my parents over the last day as everyone was saying goodbye. And that was the first school to ever offer me a scholarship. I'd spent 5 days there, and it was like a showcase in today's world. Back then, you actually had to go to camp for 5 days and sleep in a dorm. And I remember driving home and coming back home to New Jersey, where I grew up, and going back to summer practices with my high school and being like, okay, like if I can do this, if I put the work in, right? Like that was the moment where it clicked. Like I was always a good local kid growing up playing, but that was the moment I was like, okay, these guys see something in me that I could play at a different level. Like, is there a moment in time? You said it was your sophomore year when it kind of clicked. Like, do you remember that? Was it a certain game? Was it a summer travel ball? Was it just, you just felt it with how practice was going? Is there like one moment you remember when it became serious where you're like, all right, if I do this, I can be a dude?
It was probably my freshman year of high school where I made the varsity baseball team my freshman year, and I was the only freshman to do it. And I actually played a lot. I ended up starting that year and playing the whole season. And our league got a lot of guys that were actually going to Division I schools. A lot of guys getting drafted. A few guys that have spent some time in the big leagues actually. So it was a really good. Southern California is really good baseball state and area. And so it was some serious competition, and being able to hack it that year. Like I didn't dominate by any means, but I held my own. I was a good player in the league as a freshman, and playing on the same team as guys that were going to high level D1 schools and getting drafted and then playing against the same. And I was like, okay, I'm 14 years old, able to do this, like 15
Yeah.
years old. I was like, all right, in 3-4 years, like I might actually have a chance to do something here if I can already hack it with these guys and hold my own. Not dominating by any means, but definitely not getting embarrassed and looking like I didn't belong on the field. And I was like, okay, like this is going better than I thought it was going to go. Like, let's stick with it and keep working hard. And then you just kind of follow the natural progression in high school and the showcases and keep trying to get better. You keep maturing. And that was kind of the one time where I was like, I think I got a chance to do this. Like, I think I can hang here and do it with these guys. If they're already going to pro ball and I'm 4 years younger than them, like I can be them in 4 years when I'm a senior in high school.
Love that. I think that's so important. We talk all the time about putting your kids, talking to parents about putting their kids in challenging situations, right? You easily could have played on the 9th grade team and dominated. But instead, you get put up with older kids. You test yourself. You have, I'm sure you have ups and downs, but at the end of the year, you look back and you go, yeah, I held my own. And then next year as a sophomore, it gets a little easier and so on and so forth. That's something we talk about a lot here on the show is like, how do we find what that challenge is without overwhelming our kids, but also not making everything so easy so that the first time you face adversity is the first time you step on the mound as a 17-year-old, because the rest of your life, you're always the best kid on the team. You always played against teams that were inferior to you. So I think that's important for people to hear that path. Talk to me a little bit about your family, throughout the course of it. I know you had 2 brothers, your parents, like what was your family's approach to sports at a young age? I grew up, my dad was a high school football coach, as our listeners know. He pushed us. He was hard on us. He demanded a lot of us, but he never had to beg us to go. Like me, I also had 2 brothers. We were all boys. We all played Division I football. Like it was just what we did, but no one ever had to beg us. Like what was your parents' role in your ascension to being, the player that you became, getting drafted out of high school? Were they begging you to go? Were you the one saying, hey, mom, dad, brothers, hey, let's go out and play. Let's go practice. What was that dynamic like?
Fairly similar to what you're describing. We were never forced to play or pushed in a direction. Like it was always very supportive of what we wanted to do. And we just like loved sports growing up. We always wanted to play. Like that's what our friends did. Like it's just what we did. A lot of my friends growing up that I was friends with in school were in sports. We would play sports together outside of school. So that's where you'd hang out and see your friends all the time. So we always wanted to do it. And it was never pushed on us to like, you have to do this. We're going here. And it's like, no, I don't want to go here. Too bad you're going. It was never something like that. And even when I got drafted at a high school, they were basically like, look, we'll help advise you and, give you some input on this decision, whether you want to go sign and play pro baseball or you want to go to college. At the end of the day, you're the one that has to live it. Right. So you're the one that's going to make the decision. We're here for you if you want to bounce some stuff off of us or look for some guidance. But that was probably the biggest decision I made at that point in my life when I was 18. So do you want to go to college for the next 3 years? Or do you want to go in the minor leagues, ride the buses, do that whole grind and try and make it to the big leagues? And, I obviously decided to sign, but they weren't going to be like, you have to go to college or you have to sign. Like, this is what you're doing. It was all like, hey, it's your decision. You're the one that has to do it. So we're here for you if you need us. And, you're the one that's going to make it.
So often in these conversations we've had with a couple dozen people, whether they're athletes or parents or coaches, whoever they are across the spectrum, it always boils down to the successful people. It comes down to it's kid led. The kid drives it. The kid's the one saying, I want to go, I got to go practice. I got to go to game, whatever it is. I want to try this showcase, this team, whatever. And then the parent support comes next. Anytime the parent is out in front and it's the parent's idea to go practice, it's the parent's idea to put you into this camp or try you out for this team, and the kid's just along for the ride, that's when disaster strikes. So it's just so funny in interviewing all these successful people like you, the underlying threads are all very similar.
Yeah. Well, you know how it is because, if you really want to make it and really in anything, but definitely in high level sports, like if you want to make it to one of the 4 major sports leagues, like you have to, as the individually, like you have to have it in you. Like you have to have that passion. You have to have that drive. Like nobody can do it for you because it's so hard. People are so talented and there's so many people that want to do it. that if you don't, like, you're gonna wash out, or someone's gonna pass you over if you really don't have that like internal drive inside of you. Like, it's not going to work out no matter how bad somebody else wants it for you. If you don't want it that bad for yourself, then it's just never really going to work out, in my opinion.
No, you're dead on. I couldn't agree more with that. It's something that I try to instill in my 3 kids now as they're kind of entering these things, and they want to go to these tryouts, and they want to go try out for this team, or they want to go to, and they hold all these, as all these like showcase events. You can do something every weekend if you wanted to.
Right.
And my thing is, listen, if we're gonna make this sacrifice, and we're gonna drive to East Cobb down in Georgia for 7 days, and then we're gonna go to Florida. We went to East Cobb for a week. We went to Houston for a week. We went to Florida for a week. This is 10U baseball.
Right.
My rule to the kid is, if at any point your attitude sucks, your body language sucks, we've got to drag you to practice. We're done. Like, we're not making this sacrifice as a family to fly around the country to watch you play baseball and give half-ass effort. Like, I have no patience for it. You strike out, fine. You drop a fly ball, fine. You throw your helmet, you don't listen to your coach, you turn away when he's talking to you, I will rip your ass out of the dugout. I have no patience for it. Like, that's to me, it's not a outcome thing. Are you doing everything the right way? Are you a good teammate? Are you a good listener? Are you trying? You're going to screw up. You're 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're going to strike out. Are you going to bang your bat and throw your helmet? Are you going to get in the dugout and cheer on the next guy and go out and take your position in the field and be a good leader? Like, to me, that's what all this shit's about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I feel like you have to learn those lessons sometimes too. Like, you have to do it the wrong way and get corrected.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was the one getting my ass ripped out of the dugout a time or two when I was probably that age too, just because you don't know how to handle it as a kid, for sure. Also, I would say to that too, is like, just because, if there's any kids out there, just because you don't make like whatever team it is, like I was telling you earlier, I never made a perfect game All-American team. I never made an Under Armour All-American team. I played part-time at area codes. I got cut from Team USA. Like, I didn't do any of that stuff. Wasn't told you're not good enough, like, cool, you're a good player, but not good enough to do this. Ended up being a first-round draft pick, and that's my 10th season in the major leagues, So just because you don't make those teams as a kid, like, doesn't mean that you're not going to make it, or you're not going to be good enough. Like, maybe it just like wasn't your day, or you didn't play well when you needed to, or they thought somebody was better and it ended up not being the case. We were talking about, is like, I was never the best showcase player. Like, I never ran the fastest 60. I don't have the best arm at the showcase. I never hit the farthest home runs in batting practice. But when the game started, I could always play. Like, I was always getting hits. I was always being a good baseball player, but not one of my tools necessarily would stand out and wow you in a showcase setting to where it would stop everybody and be like, oh wow, like, let's pay attention to this. And so there's some guys there that they'll throw 100. I remember guys throwing 103 from the outfield in high school, or guys hitting 450-foot homers in batting practice, or running 6.160s, and that was just never me. Like, I could do all those things. I could take a good batting practice. I could run a pretty decent 60. My arm's never been great. Still isn't probably, but once the game started, could always play. And that ended up being the only thing that really mattered in the end. It was, can you play the game? Can you perform when it matters? Not necessarily in a showcase. And that kind of carried me into a pretty good major league career. But I remember it's a shitty feeling when you get cut from stuff like that. And you feel like, oh, maybe I probably could have played on that team, or I feel like I'm good enough to do it, but for whatever reason, these people don't. And that's all right. You can't let it discourage you, and you just got to keep working and see how it turns out.
Yeah, well, let's stay there, right? Because it's easy to say, yeah, don't worry about it. But at the time, right, you look back and I'm sure you feel the same way. And I can think back to games I lost and teams I didn't make or whatever. And at the moment, it felt like the end of the world. So baseball, I've, again, just living it through my kids now, and I never played obviously at any significant level, but just being around it now, it is a sport that can crush you mentally.
Oh yeah.
I see it with young kids, let alone what you guys deal with on a day-to-day basis. I said to you at the start of the show when you jumped on, like, I don't know how you guys do it. Like, if I caught one out of every 3 passes they threw me, I'd jump off a bridge.
Right.
right? And I'd be cut. So like for you guys to be able to day in and day out handle that mental grind, I want to talk a little bit more about that because I think, yes, it's relevant to baseball, but I just think it's relevant to all sports, right? Success and
Mm-hmm.
failure. It's not a matter of whether you're going to have a bad game or have failure. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen. So specifically in baseball, but just overall and just through your entire life through sports, like what has been your approach to dealing with adversity? What's been your approach to not making a team or having a batting slump or whatever, an injury, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, like that's real. There's not a player that doesn't go through that. And I think that's a really important perspective for you to give to our listeners as parents, as coaches, and then any young kids listening that I think they can learn a lot from.
Yeah. I mean, the cliche in baseball is it's a game of failure. And that is the truest thing of all time because, you get your ass handed to you all the time playing baseball, no matter what level it is, no matter how good you are, the best players in the world, they're going to suck a lot during a major league season or any kind of season. And, my biggest advice to younger kids or anybody that plays any sport, but baseball specifically is learn how to deal with failure because it's coming. Like it's not going to not happen. It might not happen to you in high school, might not happen to you in the minor leagues, might not happen to you in college, but eventually it's going to happen. Everybody's going to fail in this game. And the way you deal with it is kind of going to determine like how long you're able to last. And it's almost this thing of you kind of feel insane doing it because you just got to convince yourself all the time like it's clicking next time. Like you could have the worst night, like I'll have a terrible night in I'll have a terrible game or whatever and feel terrible to play. Like I'm lost. Like I feel like I should be hitting right-handed, and I hit left-handed. So like I'm up there like I've got zero chance. And you go home that night and you're like, damn, that sucked. Like I don't know what I'm gonna do. And by the time you go back to the stadium the next day, like you've convinced yourself that like you found it. I got it. Like today's the
So
day.
how do you
like,
do that? So tell me how that happens. Like I want to know like what is that approach? Like do you meditate? Do you watch old home runs? Do you go to the cage early? Like what do you do to change that mindset for that next plate appearance?
yeah, I mean a combo of both. I mean watching when you had success is pretty, it's underrated. I think like I think watching yourself be successful or just looking at things that went well for you in a game of failure, it goes a long way because every time I've ever done that, I walk away from it no matter how bad I feel. Like I'm like, okay, cool. Like we're back on track. I got it. I just got to do this. Then you might go take your first swing in a cage and you're like, oh shit, maybe not. But up until that point, you're like, you're back on it. Or at least it gives you, for me, it gives myself reinforcement to what I want to do or what I'm trying to accomplish. Or at least you have those images of success in your head when you're coming back to go do your job that day. Or you come up with a plan. You're like, okay, like I just need to do this. Like maybe I was late. Or maybe for me, I think a lot of things like when things don't go well for you hitting wise and people like want to point to mechanics and stuff, a lot of your mechanics break down when you're just not on time in baseball. Like you're just late and you don't think you are. Like being on time in baseball, you're earlier than you think is on time. And you kind of get back in this habit of like, all right, well, like I'm ripping off the ball or like I'm rolling over, but it's like, why? And a lot of the times it's a timing issue for a lot of people because your mind knows that you need to get this bat, and make contact with this ball at a certain point. But if you're not on time, a lot of things are going to like mechanically break down because you need to get this bat in the way of this ball that's traveling.
That's interesting.
95, 96 miles an hour. So you're going to break down mechanically. But really, there's nothing wrong with you mechanically. It's just that you're as late as shit. So you had no other choice but to do this,
I'm like going through every batting cage session that I've had with any of my kids, like as recently as this morning, and I'm sitting and I'm like having flashbacks, and I'm like trying to read. This is super helpful. Please continue.
Right. Because like if you think about it, like there's guys hit from so many ways, right? There's not like one stance or one swing in baseball that works. It's just whether or not you have enough time to do it. Guys start with their hands over their head or leg kicks or no stride or toe tap. And you can do all that as long as you have time. And basically what a pitcher's trying to do is to get you off time, whether that, by pitches, by leg kick, whether it's fastball, curveball, like the whole game of baseball is basically a time thing. And, that's always what I'll check first. It's like, all right, am I on time? And if it's like, no, then it's like, all right, well, then a lot of your problems are probably because you're not on time. And then if you are on time, then you can kind of go from there and go down the line. And each hitter's different specifically, I think, with what they do wrong. But I think your problems as a kid are your problems forever. So what you do, like when you're not doing well in baseball, it's your thing for life. Like your bad habits are your bad habits, and you kind of learn to manage them and solve them quicker the farther you go in the game. And that's what the minor leagues and all that's for, is to learn how to deal with failure and then get back on track as quick as possible and learn yourself as a player. And then you can have those quick fixes, because to be really successful in the big leagues, I think you can make adjustments very quickly, like pitch to pitch, rather than not at bat to a bat or game to game. I think that separates major league, minor league, college, amateur, is how fast you can make adjustments and you know yourself. And if you can't make adjustments in the league, then you're gone, basically, because you get figured out. There's a lot of guys that have a really good month, a really good 2 months, maybe a really good year. And then there's so much information, there's so much scouting that they're going to adjust to you. And then it's whether or not you can adjust back and keep that, that game going, basically. And then it never ends, basically, until your career's over.
I think that's yes, it's relevant to baseball, and it's relevant for anybody out there who has a kid or son or a daughter who plays baseball or softball, or sports. But I just think it's a great approach to life in general. How fast can you adjust? Right? Yeah. We all have plans. We all have visions. We all know where our life is going. And 9 times out of 10, that's not where it goes. Can you adjust? Can you, I think that's such a valuable lesson, and it brings up a good segue here to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about before I let you go. I want to talk about the approaches of the coach. So obviously you've been around a lot of coaches from the time you were a little kid, now all the way through the big leagues. When you're in one of these moments when you're in your own head and you're trying to sort out a swing or sort out something in the game or whatnot, like, what have you found as far as the best coaching practices, the guys you've been around that have helped you either sustain success, right, which is everyone's ultimate goal, and you've had a ton of it, right, MVP, All-Stars, name it. But then also the coach also has to be able to be there and know when it's time to kick you in the ass and say, hey, man, we got to work through this. Stop feeling sorry for yourself, but also know when to put his arm around you and say, hey, man, take a deep breath. Like, we got to relax. Like, what approaches have you been exposed to that you felt worked the best for you?
Yeah. I mean, my favorite kind of coach or coaching is like the guy that's willing to grind it out with you. Like, hey, you want to sit here and work on this for 2 hours, or you want to watch this for an hour? Like, cool, I'm in. Like, I love those guys, because it feels like you have someone in the fight with you. Someone's in there with you. And
that's so important.
Yeah. That's always what's mattered to me, is like, does this guy want to be in the fight, in the battle? They want to put in the work just as bad as I do, or not? Like, that's kind of how I've kind of had a good relationship with coaches, is the ones that you feel like really care or really want the best for you. And I've had a lot of success in this game, but I've also had a lot of failure in this game too, and you're constantly going through it and battling it. I've had really good years. I've had really bad years. I've had years where you're injured or whatnot. Like, my last 2 seasons haven't been probably what I've wanted, or I haven't done as well as I know I'm capable or would have liked, but you just got to keep going through it and keep finding and keep working, because I kind of feel like when you don't work and you throw in the towel, like, you know what you're going to get. It's not going to be a good result. But as long as you keep working, like, there's always a chance that it gets better. Always a chance that it can improve. And you have to build on the little victories and try and stack them together and have somebody in there that kind of reminds you of that. And sometimes it's a hitting coach. Sometimes it's a coach that pushes you, or sometimes, like you said, it's a guy that, like, keeps it real, or you can just, like, talk to about certain feelings, or like whatever it may be. Maybe it has nothing to do with the sport, but you're just in this grind with these guys for months, right? Like, you spend more time with your teammates during a season than you do with your own family or anybody else. Like, whoever's in that life with you are the people that you're around for the majority of the year. That just, kind of the life we chose and what comes along with it. So you lean on coaches, you lean on teammates, like people that really get it and understand like what the grind's all about and how hard this shit can be sometimes.
No shit. It's so funny you say that. After my worst games, you wanted to be around your teammates and you wanted to be around like your guys, your team, the other players, the coaches, because I felt like when you were around, if you were around other people, like friends that don't play, like people in your neighborhood, and like nobody gets it, right? Like, he dropped 3 balls, he had a bat. But like when you're around your guys, and these are other guys that understand the grind, they understand the fight, they understand the adversity. Like those are the people that you don't feel are passing judgment. Because guess what? Next game, one of those guys is going to be shit, right? So I always used to have it was almost like a karma type thing. I never shit on anybody else. You could have dropped 15 balls in a game, and after the game, there's no, come on, man, you're killing. Because guess what? The first time you jump somebody else for playing like shit, you're going to be the dog the next game.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, I believe that wholeheartedly. Like if you're going to give it, it's going to be you. So I think that's so important. But like, what is that interaction? So just dive a little deeper for me. Like that coach who's grinding with you, right? He's holding you accountable. He say, hey, I'll sit here and throw balls to you until you figure it out. Is there feedback? Is he just picking maybe one thing? Just one coaching point that he's saying, hey, let's just get our mind on one thing. Let's not try to fix 5 things at once. Or is it just, I'm going to be here to toss the ball. I'm going to be here to do soft toss. I'll put it on the tee, whatever it is. And you sort through it. Like, what is the interaction that you prefer as you're kind of sorting things out?
For me, it's like coming up with a plan together. Like we'll sit down and watch video or something. And like, all right, this is it. Or this is what we're trying to accomplish, or this is what I want to do. And then you feel like the two of you are kind of in it together, where it's like, all right, sweet. Like we've identified like what we want to do. Now let's go figure out how to do it, basically. And then you have someone that holds you accountable or that is in the fight with you or can kind of check you, because you might think you're doing something, but you might not be. And you need someone to be like, all right, like, no, that's not it. Like, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. Like, this is what we talked about. And they're there for you. And, that I feel like you make it through a season like that, or you have a teammate that you can bounce stuff off. Because like you were saying, like after games, like your teammates might know what happened. Like it might look a certain way to the 40, 50,000 people that are in the stands, but it actually is like completely opposite. Like something really messed up happened that led to this. And only the people that like play the game understand like what happened, or it might look like a really bad play or error or something to someone who's just sitting in the stands watching.
Of course.
But anybody that played knows like, man, like that was just really shitty luck, man.
That was a shit. That ball took a bad bounce.
Right. Like
whatever.
You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. It just happened to be you today. But if anybody else was in that situation, it would have been
Of course.
But you were just, you're just the poor guy that's gonna have to wear it, and they'd understand that, but really nobody else might, right? Or
of course
they know what it's like to put in work and see no results. Like just because you work hard doesn't mean that anything good is going to happen. You can put in all the work, but that doesn't guarantee you results at all. It just guarantees you have a chance.
But if you don't put in the work, I can guarantee you'll suck.
Right. That's
at some point.
The one guarantee. That's the one guarantee. Like if you don't work on it or you're sucking and you don't want to try and figure it out, like what's going to happen next, because it's not going to go well for you. But
no doubt,
if you put in the work, at least there's the chance, but it doesn't guarantee you results. And I think those might be the most frustrating times, is when you put in a lot of the work and you see absolutely nothing. You're like, great. Like we got absolutely nowhere.
Let's change gears here before I let you go, because I know you guys are on a crazy schedule. So again, thank you for this insight and perspective is just so cool. I'm fascinated by it. I'll make a quick segue fast, and then I'll get to my last point. What I've enjoyed about baseball, just learning it. Again, I played up until high school, stopped playing and did not play in high school. So I played as a kid, casually. I've gotten into learning baseball just being around my kids and coaching their rec teams and, now watching them play travel and, whatever. I've gotten such an appreciation for the sport just from living and dying with every at bat and living and dying with your kid on the mound, and he's got runners on second and third, and you're like, holy shit. Like,
Yeah.
right. Like I've gained such a unique perspective of the game. And we've talked a lot about the failures that come with the game, but we're also talking here with a guy who has been MVP, first round draft pick. I mean, you've had a lot of successes at the same time. So you talk about putting in the work, and it's hard when you don't have the success, but now you're putting in all the work consistently, and when you're having that success, right? And you're on an MVP run, you're on an all-star level, you're batting 340. When you're in one of those runs, let's talk about that mindset. It's easy to work hard when you're struggling, right? If I had a bad game and dropped a couple passes, you'd bet your ass 20 minutes before practice started, I'd be on the field and having somebody throw me balls. But if I caught 10 passes, would I still be out there in pre-practice catching the same catching routine? So talk to me a little bit about when you're feeling it, you're rolling, you're having a great run, a great stretch of games. How do you continue that same approach? Because success to me is the greatest enemy of a player, right? Because you lose the grind. It's easy to work hard when you suck. Talk to me a little bit about when you're having success, what sort of approach you continue with.
Yeah, I never wanted to get complacent, especially in baseball, because I feel like you can go from like feeling locked in to like, I'm never getting out again, to the next day, like picking up a bat and being like, oh God, like what just happened? Or, and nothing happened. Like, it's just a new day, and you get in the cage and you're like, oh my God, what happened?
It's so crazy.
Right? And I think that happens because like when you're doing your routine or you're doing like batting practice and you're going well, like you start at like point A, right? And maybe you're just like getting loose that day, and you're just like, all right, you're not doing what you usually do, but you're just kind of getting loose. Maybe your body doesn't feel as good, so it takes you a little bit longer. And that was fine that day. You got away with it. You're still playing good. And then that happens the next day. You're kind of getting loose, and then the next day and the next day. And you wake up one day and you start at point A, and then you're all the way over here. And it took a week, but it was little by little. So you didn't really notice that anything was changing. Like you got a little lazy, or you got a little complacent, or like you just weren't feeling as good that day. And you started here and ended up here, and it was a week's time, and you didn't really know what happened. So for me, I always wanted to, when I was going really well, I would want to be really focused and not let that happen. And I would take less reps or less whatever, but be way more focused and diligent. Like I would know what I wanted to do or what I wanted to feel, and I would just make myself do it. Like maybe you're not going to take as much today because you don't feel as good for whatever reason. Like maybe we were playing 18 games in a row and it's been 4-city trip, and your body's just spent because you've played every day. But really lock in and focus on like what you want to do, and just be relentless in that, because it can go so fast in baseball to where you can feel really good and feel really bad all at the same time. And I just wanted to like ride those streaks out for as long as possible. And I had a good understanding of what I wanted to do and what I was feeling at the time and how my body was working. Just made myself lock into that and really be focused on it. And, once you get an understanding of like something small that allows you to be like really successful, something small and very repeatable, I think, for hitting, like there's
repeatable seems like a big baseball. That's like a big baseball component, right? Like being able to repeat something over and over and over again is the entire game.
Yeah. It's consistency is basically the whole game. Like,
yeah.
The people that are the most consistent at like getting their body in a good position to hit, like being on time, consistent, being in a good position more times than not, you're going to give yourself more chances to be successful. Whether it happens or not, who knows? But if you're in a consistent spot enough times, like you're going to have success in the long run. Like maybe just baseball, you can do everything right and go over 4. You could line out 4 times, and it's considered a bad day, or you could blow up 4 bats and you got 4 hits, and everyone thinks it's a great day, but you got a pile of firewood in the locker room afterwards, So it's just one of those sports where nothing makes sense sometimes. And it could be true. Like, it could be just like it's mental warfare all the time in baseball. And, I think just consistent. And like when I was going really good and having MVP seasons and stuff like that, it was little small keys that I could repeat all the time and just like clicked. And I stumbled upon him one day and just stuck after it and just really stayed with it and believed in it. And, it
I
clicked.
love
It
that.
changed my career, changed my life, and just did it. I just had a feeling one day in the cage, like, I want to try this and see what happens. And it kind of clicked for me. And then I stuck with it and was able to repeat it all the time and just got red hot and was able to ride that out for a while.
I'm fascinated by just all of this. My mentality, even like coaching the kids teams in baseball, sometimes I step back and I'm like, my way of, if I had a bad game, that next practice, Wednesday practice, it was going to be like, it was going to be full throttle, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
my point was going to be, I'm flushing that game. Now, granted, I had 7 days before I had to play again. You have
Right.
like 2 hours.
Yeah.
but like I could come like will myself back with how hard I practiced and how hard I trained and run and catch extra balls. And you almost like could will yourself through a bad game and flush it and move on. What I find watching the kids is like watching my own kids, the more they grind on it, the more they stress on it, the more that it goes the other way.
Mm-hmm.
It almost gets like more becomes less. And it's just so counterintuitive to how I've always approached football, but it's also opened my eyes and given me a greater appreciation for just how hard it is to do what you guys do, because that mental grind, I'm not sure if I could do it. I really don't think I'm mentally, my mindset would be good dealing with that up and down day in and day out. I applaud you guys. I can't, I don't know how you do it. I really don't.
Yeah, you just get used to it, honestly. Like, yeah, it's a mental grind. And like before the season, like when the season ends, you always look back on it, at least for me, and be like, how do we make it through that?
It's
You know
so
what I mean?
true. It's so
Or
true.
when you're staring it down in spring training, like you come to spring training and you just like, what's ahead of you because you've done it for so long.
How am I going to do this? Yeah,
You're
guys
just
today
like, oh
reported for
shit.
training camp. The
Yeah.
NFL reported for training camp today, so I'm watching like Instagram guys walk out to practice and whatnot, and I'm thinking to myself like, how the hell did I do that 14 times?
Yeah.
Like that
And
seems horrible.
yeah. And the
But
reality of it is you do it day by day, right? Like
and
you just
I
got to
can't
be in
help
the
it.
present. Yeah. You got to
That's
be in
it.
the present, and like, it's coming at you, whether you want it to or not. Like you're in it.
Yeah.
So you gotta look at it in really, really small
Yeah.
bites. And I tell guys or younger guys, if they ask, like, it takes a really long time to have a good season. It takes a really long time to have a bad season too. Like, it doesn't happen in a week. It doesn't happen in a day. Like you can't have a good season in a week or a month. You can't have a bad season in a week or a month. Like, whatever happens in baseball always takes a really long time. Like, the
That's a
games take a
great
long
point.
time. The games take a long time. To have a good or bad season takes a long time. So you kind of just have to be in the moment and just put your head down and grind. And some years are going to be really good for you. Some years are going to be tougher years where just shit doesn't go your way, and that's how it is. But if you go underwater, you just put everything you have into it and you grind, it's going to work out for you more times than not, because it takes a really long time. So you just got to embrace it and be like, I'm in it.
That's such a great point. That's a really, I think if there's one way to kind of sum up this entire conversation, I think that's a really good perspective to keep in mind. I think that's for young guys to get that advice from you, I think is super valuable. Well, as we close up here, I'd be remiss as we were doing research and kind of learning a little bit more about you. And I knew we'd have a million things to talk about. We could go on for 4 hours if we wanted to, but I'm going to let you go here. I read, it was really cool. I saw that you, in Milwaukee, obviously playing with the Brewers, with one of your corporate partners, you guys refurbished some of the Little League fields. And so are you super involved with some of the Little League and some of the youth baseball back home? Or was it like, how involved are you back there in Milwaukee or back home in California? That do you spend a lot of time with young kids at camps and through Little League and whatnot?
Yeah, I'll try to. So American Family, yeah, one of the people that, or one of the companies I work with, or they have the naming rights to our stadium as well. They try and refurbish a Little League field every year, just renovate it or give them whatever they need. And I think it's pretty cool, just giving back to kids that are playing the game, learning the game, because, not only does it give you really good opportunity later in life, but you make a lot of good friends. You learn a lot of things through sport and through competition, the ups and downs, learn, like you said, like we talked about, this whole time, is like learning how to deal with failure, learning what it's like to be a good teammate, or to have people count on you or depend on you. And just to have a good place to go and do that, I think is really important. And it's really special that American families willing to do that and invest their time and money in the community and allow me to be a part of it as well. And just to give back to, communities that support you, or were, for me, when I go home, or that allowed me to become what I am and have this life and make these friends. And just maybe there's a kid at that little league that's going to grow up and end up having a great career and comes back and gives back as well, and returns the favor. So whenever you have a chance to do good, I think it's important. And we've been blessed with a platform and the ability to do so. And, I think you should whenever you have the opportunity.
Well, I told you at the start of the show that you're our first big leaguer that we've had on. We talk a lot about baseball, but it's usually 10 and 11-year-old baseball. It's not Major League Baseball. But for our first baseball guest, I don't know if we could have had on a guy with a better perspective, a better message, a better understanding of just not only how challenging sports are, both at the youth level, but also just at any level, but also how rewarding they are. And I think that's kind of the mantra we try to capture here on You Think is, yeah, sports can be hard. It can be frustrating. It can be a grind on the whole family. But I'll tell you what, when it's good, there's nothing better. And I think that was the big message that I got out of just hearing, your stories and your perspective. So I think on behalf of our viewers and our listeners and everybody, I think for you to take time at the middle of a season, middle of a grind, to come share your perspective, your stories, your kind of life with us here on You Think, man, we're just so thankful and appreciative, and just wish you nothing but the best of luck going forward, not only this year, but the rest of your career.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for having me. And yeah, it's a good message. I think when you have success, it's really important to enjoy it too. I think a lot of times I was like head down grinding, like don't let it get to your head. But especially in baseball, there's so much failure. The times you do good, you got to enjoy it. And in sport in general, it's really hard to do well in sports, at whatever level. So when you do well, like enjoy it. You worked really hard for that, and it doesn't always go well. You don't always have great games. So I think when you do, like, you need to let yourself enjoy it, because the next day could be a grind, and kind of just live in the moment and be happy. Like, yeah, obviously don't let it get to your head and, think I'm the man, I got to figure it out. But when you do well, like, hey, enjoy it. Like, all right, like that all that work was worth it, or we're headed in the right direction. It kind of gets you through the grind. So I appreciate you having me, man. I really enjoyed it. Time flew by. Like you said, I wish we had a little bit longer so we could keep going forever, but
I got a lot,
maybe we'll run it back one of these days.
Yeah.
Or
you can become a recurring, you can become our MLB recurring guest, and you can
for sure
just keep us
bring
up
the boys out to a game or something if we cross paths, and
I'd love to
that way.
I'd love to. My boys would die to come out. They, like I said, they've gotten big into baseball. We watch it on TV. We learn, we study it. I find myself laying in bed at night. I'll tell you what, you can learn a lot about baseball on Instagram now.
Oh yeah.
The amount of drills that I've stolen from guys, and oh my God, you can learn a lot about shit on Instagram these days. I don't know if these guys know what they're talking about, but it looks good to a guy like me.
Some of them do. Some of them are full of shit. I have no idea what they're talking about.
Most of them are full of shit.
Yeah, but there's some good ones out there for sure that actually know what they're doing. But yeah, man, we'll get connected, bring the boys out, and whenever you guys are free. I know you got a busy schedule, so do we. So whenever we cross paths, man, that'd be awesome.
That'd be great, man. Well, hey, best of luck. I appreciate it. Good luck the rest of this season and beyond, and look forward to crossing paths here soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Appreciate you, buddy. See you, man. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with 2018 NL MVP Christian Yelich. Just his journey through youth sports, not only travel baseball, not only that youth showcase circuit as a high school player, but just as a kid playing multiple sports, and kind of just getting an insight into his journey, and kind of what allowed him to be a, high school kid being drafted first overall, and obviously now going on to have an MVP all-star caliber career, which kind of speaks for itself. So I think it was just such a timely and such a relevant conversation with a current superstar type player who went through this showcase travel youth sports world not too long ago. And to be able to just compare and contrast how different it is today from when he went through it, I think was a really timely and a really interesting conversation. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And I know I did, and learned a lot from it. My kids were stoked that he was coming on. That's like the one episode they were fired up for. They're not a big fan apparently of Dad. It's more who Dad talks to. At this time, as always, I will bring in Tasha, our producer. Tasha, what's happening? And
Hi.
I'm sure you have lots of good questions from our followers and people that continue to submit. And we thank you guys so much. Continue to submit, continue to send in your questions, because Tasha loves being on the show. So any excuse she has to get some camera time, she's in.
I'm like, please give me something to ask Greg too, please.
I just want to be on the show so bad.
Yeah. In relation to baseball, one of our first audience questions says that a coach in Long Island allowed his 10-year-old pitcher to pitch 159 pitches in one game after pitching 49 pitches the day before to ensure the win. So they wanted to know your take on that.
It's almost hard for me to believe. I'd almost want to like fact check that. Hopefully this is a true story. Hopefully this is somebody that's actually sending in something that happened, because that just sounds so, I almost don't know how that's possible. And I have yet to be in a tournament, especially at that age, let alone any age, where there wasn't pitch count limits. And oftentimes it's 75 pitches in a day and only can throw maybe 100 pitches for the entire weekend tournament based on, 3-day tournament, whatever it is. So the fact that he would go 49 and then 159 and be at 200, it just seems unrealistic. So that first and foremost, I have a little skepticism of whether that's actually true or not.
Maybe it's Long Island,
Long Island, Strong Island. Those guys, they don't, apparently they have rubber arms, but let's just assume that it is true, that coach should no longer be allowed to coach. Like, that's beyond just reckless. That's beyond, that's abusive, right? We all get caught up in wanting to win. We all probably get, but 149 pitches in a day, forget that he pitched the day before. Just that one day, someone needed to step in, an assistant coach, a parent, and say, hey, listen, this has gone too far. Like, who cares about winning and losing this 10-year-old baseball game? You're killing this kid. So I that's alarming to me. If that's really going on up there, somebody in that organization, somebody in that area needs to get a grip and place some guardrails for these coaches. If the coaches can't do it themselves, then someone's going to have to do it for them, which is pathetic. But there's a lot to unpack there, and that's very concerning, very alarming, and it's just outright dangerous. It's just not fair to the kid. It's not fair to any of the other kids. There's no place for that sort of overuse, especially for a kid, who's so young. He's 10 years old. So they need to take a good hard look at what they're doing up in Long Island, because that's pretty concerning.
Yeah, that's wild. The second question from you guys says, how much time are you putting into coaching, Greg, for tackle football each week? Are you watching film? Are you drafting up plays, prepping drills with your dad? They want to know the prep time that goes into it.
I am almost embarrassed to say how much time I spend on it. I'm being dead honest. Like, we practice. So starting August 1st, which was like quote unquote training camp, we have, call it 3 weeks before the kids go back to school, end of August. So for those 3 weeks, we were going 4 days a week, a good 3 hours a night. So we were doing 12 hours a week, give or take 10, 12 per week for the first 3 weeks. So add that up. But then in between that, to the point of the question, right, you don't just show up to practice and make it up. We have a practice plan. We have, a text message thread where we say, all right, here's what we want to work on defense. Here's what we're seeing. Here's what we need. We need to work on our coverages, our fronts. The kids need to get better at they need to learn everything. We approach this season like they knew nothing. And in most cases, they didn't, right? So we got to teach stance. We got to teach footwork. We've got to teach alignment. We've got to teach tackling. We've got to teach blocking. We've got to teach how to block. It's just, it's never ending. So it's a full commitment now. And this is my first time coaching this age of football. And it makes you appreciate just how much there is goes into football and how much of a foundation we owe these kids to allow them to make their middle school team and beyond to high school or whatnot. So it's a lot. We film as much of practice as we can nowadays with the phones. I can stand right back there and record, and I'll sit up at night and I'll send a tape to, Johnny's dad and say, hey, this is what I'm talking about with Johnny. Can you show him this and tell him, X, Y, or Z? So like we can share the videos with the parents and they can then reinforce at home maybe what we're going through. Sometimes it's easy for them to see it. You can tell them over and over. But, there's a lot that goes into it. I'll tell you, you're scripting plays, you're scripting, things that sound good in your head, but doesn't work for 10-year-olds. It is an exhausting and it's almost like a full-time job, I'll tell you. But it'll calm down now to only like 2 or 3 nights a week now that school starts. But for the last couple of weeks, it's been a grind.
Nice. Shout out to all you coaches out there grinding.
Shout out, grind mode.
The next one is kind of more of a feedback. Interesting. They said, "Hey, Greg, I actually played at Wayne Hills for your dad." Hey, yo.
Uh-oh.
Say your name, but he didn't.
He didn't say his name?
He didn't say his name, no. Huh.
Okay.
But he said, "I also just got into coaching, and as part of our certification, we had to take the Tip of the Spear clinic. I thought it was awesome. The philosophy is great for youth football." He wants to know if you think that's also a good option for your listeners to help improve their coaching.
Yeah, so to coach in the league that we're all coaching in, we had to go through a pretty extensive like online training. And I'll be honest, the first, so you watch like a little like slideshow presentation on, the beginning is like health and safety and fitting equipment. Like that stuff's pretty straightforward. That hasn't changed a lot over the years. And then at the end of each section, you take a test. And you got to get 80% of the test questions right. You get 10 questions or whatever it is. And then you can pass to the next section and you just continue on. It's probably 3-4 hours of class. It's a legitimate certification. But what was funny was it got to the part on teaching tackling, teaching blocking, teaching taking on blocking. And it was taught like I've never seen before. It was not how I was taught. It was not how I had ever heard anyone be taught. It was taught in a very new age. Obviously, we don't want kids hitting with their helmets. We don't want kids leading with their helmets, but it like takes it to the very extreme. So, we're obligated to coach it as such. But I had to like really watch these demonstrations and understand the terminology and understand the technique. And then you go take these multiple choice questions. And the first couple of times I didn't pass it. Like this was Chinese to me. So I would go back and I'd rewatch the demonstration of these guys demonstrating, what we call this tackle, what we call this blocking technique. And it was stuff I've never heard of.
Interesting.
But it was not easy. It was very, very different than what I had been around for 30 years. Wow. So it's a different age now of teaching. And I get why they're doing it, right? It's all the safety and the heads up and keeping everything out. But it's very, very contrary to how I learned the game and how I've experienced the game for a long time. So it was a little bit of a learning curve for me to make sure when we went out onto the field, we coached the kids the appropriate way, right? The safety and keeping their heads out of it and how to strike and how to tackle and how to use their shoulders and whatnot and not use their heads. It was a learning curve for me as well, but I'm glad I did it. So to answer the question, I think that certification stuff is great. I think even for people who've been around the game for a long time, the way we're coaching young kids to play the game now is just very different. And if you don't learn it, you don't teach it, you're not gonna teach them in the right manner, and that opens up a whole nother can of worms. So it was a good education. It was a good refresher for all of us. But it took some studying in order to pass it and get my certification. So it was a real deal.
Good job, Greg. Way to pass
Thanks.
that test.
Yeah, maybe I'll share my certification on Instagram and just show off a little bit.
I think you should. That's what counts, the certification, not the professional athlete part.
Yeah,
you still had to pass the test. It's wild.
It's just, I'll tell you, Tasha, your dad would lose his mind.
I'm sure
he'd lose his mind. He'd lose his mind.
I think he's losing his mind.
I'm sure he's losing his mind for other reasons at times, but the way we are teaching the kids, it's hard. It's hard to block people and tackle people the way they want you to do it. It just is. And, the kids got to learn it. We're trying, we're obviously their safety and all that stuff is real, and we're trying to do it the right way. But I'll tell you what, it makes it a lot harder to get somebody to the ground. You can only use your arms.
What do you mean you don't use your arms?
Like when I was coming up, right? Like the heads up thing was always, even when I was a kid, was always thing. You never hit with the crown of your helmet. You never hit with the top of your head. But we were taught to hit with our face masks, right? Like we were taught to put our face mask in their chest, drive, and then slide your head to the side and run through contact on strike. Now the head, understandably so, they're trying to remove from the strike. So they want you tackling everything off to the side where your head would be like to the backside of a runner. We were always taught, get your head across, run through contact. Now everything's get your head behind. So all you really have is half your body, your shoulder, the old arm tackle thing. They're pretty much teaching kids to wrap with their arms and like alligator roll and like bring the kid down to the ground in that capacity. And, I know a lot of the NFL guys are starting to transition to it and teach it that way, and that's fine. But for these young kids, they just end up grabbing everybody with their hands and trying to pull them to the ground. And, when that kid's a big kid, he's a big sixth grader, you're not getting him to the ground by just grabbing his jersey. So it's an adjustment for everybody, trying to teach kids how to be safe, how to protect themselves. That's number one priority. But then they also signed up to play tackle football. Like at some point you got to go tackle somebody. So it's just very different. It's just a very different day and age of how we're teaching it. And that's what we signed up for. And we're going to teach them accordingly.
Nice. Well, hey, that's it for all of the audience questions today. Keep submitting them in. Greg loves answering them. We love reading them and sifting through them as well. And you could submit them at YouThink or Greg Olson on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, Tasha. Thank you so much to all of our listeners and followers. Thank you guys for continuing to submit your questions, engage with us, and continue to interact. And again, continue to guide us on where you want to see You Think go. We've casted such a wide net. I feel like we've had conversations in every single area of youth sports and beyond. So it's been a great journey. We have some fun episodes in store for you guys the next couple weeks. Continue to rate, review, subscribe. Thank you again to our sponsor, Body Armor. And until next week, we look forward to having you guys back for another episode of You Think.